Hello, and welcome to the Makers Movement podcast, where we hang out with designers, curators, collectors, everyday folks that embrace handmade, and of course, the makers themselves. I'm so glad you're here, and if you're new, you might be wondering, what's with the movement? What does that even mean? The Makers Movement is an easy way to embrace handmade and empower makers, simply by purchasing one handmade item each month. We keep it exciting with monthly themes, and we share our finds with a community made up of cool people that love handmade too. Mass produced AI generated shit is absolutely everywhere right now. So, what does our world look like if we take a step back, take a deep breath, connect with a human, with a story, and make intentional purchases that add character to our lives? Doesn't that sound like a dream? It's not. You found it. Come hang out and have a super fun time with gasp humans. Welcome to the Makers Movement. I'm very happy to share that our theme for this month, and our very first theme of the month, is something that makes your favorite food even more enjoyable. So I'll give an example. We have been searching for some of those deeper kind of spoons for broth. We love some ramen and some pho in this house. And so we were at World Market and we picked some up, and my incredible partner Adam mentioned, like, hey, wouldn't it be fun to practice what we preach with Makers Movement and just go ahead and find a maker that does these already? Probably way cooler. So yeah, that inspired this month's theme, and I hope it can add some character and some joy to your favorite meal. Today, I am so excited to introduce our very first guest on the Makers Movement podcast. Her name is Olivia Avery. She is a ceramicist who has the most gorgeous work. I first met her at Porterflea, which is an awesome kind of makers market that happens here in Nashville twice a year. Was immediately drawn to her work, had to kind of fight through the crowds to actually get to her booth. And then I was so taken aback by the beauty of her work that I don't even know what I said or if I said anything to her the first time I saw her. But as soon as this idea for this podcast and this movement kind of bubbled up, I knew that she was somebody that I wanted to talk to. So I am so excited to have her on today. And yeah, I'll go ahead and let you guys listen to our conversation. So, to kick us off, I would love to just learn a little bit more about you and specifically how you got started in ceramics.
So, okay, it was a total accident, to be honest. I haven't ever really been good at much of anything, I should say. Well, like school stuff. So in school when I was young,
Okay.
algebra wasn't for me, math was not for me, just not how I thought. And my cousin was drawing these really cool things, and I was looking at them, and I was like, man, I could do that. That'd be a piece of cake. So I just started drawing because I was like, "Well, I can beat my cousin, whatever." And then that was maybe 9 or 10, and then after a year or 2 of doing that, my mom's, "Hey, have you thought about art classes? Are you interested?" Because I was homeschooled, and I said, "Well, yeah, I'm interested." And she goes, "Well, great. I'm an engineer. I can't teach you, so we're gonna put you in a class." So I met my first art teacher and kinda got into it, and then maxed out what I could learn from her. I got in with a different art teacher who ended up being my mentor before college and during college, actually. And they kind of pushed me in the art direction because that was my strength. And I was like, okay, hell yeah, like I can do that. I can draw, sure. So it was mostly drawing. I did a little painting, but that wasn't for me either. But drawing I could do. And then when I was applying for school, for college, it was like, okay, this is what you got going on. I guess you should do it. And I was like, all right, whatever. So when you get to college, you have to take all these basic classes for an art degree, and you have to take two-dimensional design, three-dimensional design, painting, drawing, usually sculpture of some sort and some sort of elective. So they're in certain patterns. So my friends were like, "Hey, we're going to take this three-dimensional design class and we're going to take clay hand building because we want to throw on the pottery wheel," which I had never even heard of before. And I was like, "Oh, okay, whatever." So we took the 3D class, and the next semester they're like, "Hey, do you wanna come to the hand building class with us?" And I said, "Well, not really." And they're like, "Well, we're all gonna be there." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." Peer pressure. And I was like, "Well, yeah, I wanna hang out with my friends, sure." So I started taking the class, and it was different than any other art class I had taken. And it was really approachable, whereas drawing typically isn't, even though I had been doing it for, you know, 15 years by that point, I don't know, 17. It was kind of crazy to step into a class where no one knew what they were doing. We're all just kinda playing with mud, and there's, like, rock and roll going on in the back, and everyone's drinking coffee, and this is our 8 AM class, and I was like, "Wait a minute, I could do this. This sounds pretty sick."
Yep.
So the yeah, exactly, yeah, okay. So the semester after that was throwing. So you do a semester of hand building first, so you can understand clay processes and fire techniques and glaze chemicals. Then you move into throwing. So it was just kind of like the natural order of stuff. So I just jumped into throwing, and then before I knew it, ceramics was my major and drawing was my minor. And I was like, well, okay, cool. So I got a degree in ceramics, much to everyone's surprise, and completely quit when I got out of school because I had just a really aggressive teacher, which, I mean, he taught
Mm,
me so many things, but he was really hardcore. And I said, you know what? I need to step away from this and see if I love this as well. So I took about a year off, maybe 8 months, and was just waiting tables. And I was like, man, I hate this. This is pretty awful. I got to do some clay stuff. I know how to do it. Let's just do it. So I moved back to Memphis, started working in a studio, and I was, first just helping manage a studio. And then they're like, hey, do you know how to throw? And I was like, yeah, I do. They're
yep.
like, "Do you wanna do our production?" And I was like, "Well, sure, like, I get paid to throw pots, absolutely, I could do that." And then COVID happened, of course, they laid everyone off, and I still had a key to the studio, and my mom was like, "Well, why don't you just go in and make whatever you want?" And I was like, "Okay, cool." I was working on a big order for somebody, and so I was working in a nursery, and then at the end of the plant nursery day, I'd go and change to my pajamas and go throw pots for a couple hours at night just by myself in the studio, and it was awesome. And then they started getting things back going, everybody's masking, we're ready to rock, and then I was like, "Yeah, mom, I'm gonna go get back to this job and get going again," and she said, your pots are a lot better when you're not making them for someone else. You should really think about
Mm,
that. Why don't you rent space and not work for them?" And I was like, "Oh, I've never thought of this before. Okay, let's do it. Sure, let's give it a shot." So I got a job doing something totally non-art related, but it paid well, and it came with some benefits, and I was like, "Okay, great. Let's get into this, and then let's start making pots kind of part-time and start selling and kind of see what we can do. I'll start bookkeeping just because I have a few orders here and there, a few markets here and there." Sure. And after probably 2 years, I was making more side hustling with clay than I was working this job full time. And so I asked my boss for less hours, and he gave me some and worked out a part-time, and then I was like, "Hey, I can only work 3 days a week. I have too much business." And he was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Just quit. Like, just get out of
Just
here."
get out of here.
Yeah, give yourself a year, do it full time for a year, and then if you fall flat on your ass, like, we can give you your job back. And I was like, "Wow,
Huge.
that's a blessing. Okay, sure, I'll try it for a year." And that was about 3.5 years ago. So
Absolutely unreal. I
it's crazy.
I truly relate to that idea of, "Okay, let's try this." Like, "All right, I'll try that." I think, there's a lot of
Right.
pressure to have everything figured out, and I think I'll self-identify as creative in this moment and just say, "Same. I never had that. It's definitely this thing."
No,
So very
never.
relatable. Kudos to your mom for seeing, the high level view of your abilities and just where you thrived. That's huge.
Moms know, they know.
That's
And every time I make a really special piece where the form comes out beautifully and the decor comes out beautifully, I always set it aside and I use them for gifts for her because she has this
no.
huge shrine, shelf, whatever you want to call it, that's full of all these pieces that I've made. And I can visit them if they're at her house. So she gets all the really special pieces.
Oh, that's incredible to hear. That leads into my next question for you, which is your mom very much sounds like a creative. You mentioned she's an engineer, which I think counts. That's a whole separate side of
Totally.
creativity. Were you surrounded by makers and handmade when you were younger?
Don't get me started on the historical women textile thing, okay?
You
Because
don't have time.
don't even we don't have we'd have to do a whole nother podcast for this. But my grandmothers, of course, were knitting and sewing and making things in the house that women traditionally do for free. Okay. And so I was around that and I learned how to like hand sew when I was pretty young by one of my grandmothers. So kind of, but no one was doing it vocationally. No one who was doing it regularly. My dad, well, Okay, I guess if you count music as creative, right? My family is super, super, super musical. We were all taught how to play the piano and could do scales by the time we were like 4 or 5. That was just a prerequisite for, I guess, life in my parents'
I
house,
was
but right, and they put us in private music lessons, they put us in marching band, and I tried violin, I tried flute, I tried the drums, and it wasn't for me. I knew that was not it. I didn't know what was
yeah.
it, but that wasn't it. And all of my siblings, are musically inclined, even if it's just with what they listen to. But I had brothers in metal bands, I had sisters in private flute lessons and marching bands. I mean, I have my youngest sister is in school at a music conservatory now. She plays a cello. So creatively,
Oh, wow.
music wise, that was everywhere. But not really many people were drawing or painting. My dad would sketch a lot. I really loved his old school ink drawings. But other than that, no. I didn't know anybody who was doing
Yeah.
it vocationally.
I'm glad you called it out too, of, like, it was just the way of things before, before we made it a whole separate segment of making. That's just how things were created, so
Right. Right.
and mass production is relatively new, so yeah. So I'd love to dig in more on your process. So I'll definitely share visuals and I'll pull in a couple of clips of your work just for folks to see, but I'm just blown away by the techniques, and I'll say drawing techniques, so correct me if that's off, but some of the stippling and the layers that you use, that was what initially drew me to your work from a distance. I remember telling my partner, like, when all of those people clear out, I'm going right there. So I would love to learn more about, like, how you approach a new piece or, like, how much of it is planned versus just how it turns out? Just kinda talk through your process.
So it didn't start out for to be what it is now, I'll say that. There have been a lot of steps that have led up to, can I repeat this? Can I repeat this particular pattern on any form? Can I alter it in such a way where it can go from a form that's, 4 inches tall to one that's 2 feet or 3 feet tall? Can it wrap a surface? The way my current like motifs and drawings started was someone asked me to make, I mean, I've always done line work. Of course, drawings like second nature. So I've always put lines on pots, whether it be carving or additive. But someone asked me to, can you put like the aura of the beach or of Florida on a mug? And I said, "Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, but can we make it tasteful? Like I'm not putting a fish or seashells on it." And they said, "Well,
Yeah.
sure. Could you just do something with like color or vibe?" And I was like, "Okay, I got you. Say no more." So I had, like a dark green, I had a yellow, I had a burnt orange, and like a sky blue. And I said, I got this. So I just did some basic leaves and then put these little spurts of dots behind it. And I thought, oh, yeah, this is cool. They're going to love this. So it was an order for someone. And of course, I took photos of it and then I put the photos on my Instagram. And I didn't have my notifications turned on, right? So I got off Instagram. And the next day I got on and people absolutely loved it. And I was like, well, that's weird. It's just leaves and dots. It's so simple. Okay, I could do that. So I started doing that a little bit more, and then I was like, "Okay, wait, if I'm doing not just rugs, I'm doing all this other stuff. I should have formulas for how the plant moves across the pot, and I can't just have random things and dots. I need to put one color of dots on one side of the plant and a different color on the other side of the plant. Okay, I can do that." So I started doing that, which is so many dots I can't even begin to explain to you. I think I counted like on 2 leaf sections on a vase once and I got up to 1,000 and I had to stop myself because I
Oh
don't
my
really wanna
god.
know. Because in my head, I'll be like mathematically like, "You have, 50,000 more dots to get done tonight."
Yeah, the engineer comes out a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. She's there. She's there. She's in there. She's very organized. So it didn't start off, it started off pretty organic, working with a vibe, if you will, or a theme or like an aura of a place. And it came into this thing and people started really loving this one collection. And I was like, man, how do I make this same collection, but in a different color? So okay, I'm going to take this same pattern and just color scheme it to be something darker. I'm going to dark green. So I got that going, and then I said, "Okay, I need to switch plants." So then I had to do all this plant study, figure out what I wanted, figure out can I draw it, and I don't actually draw them on the pots. I pipe them. So it's a technique called slip
Oh.
trailing or underglaze trailing, where you squeeze it out onto the surface, kinda like a in a tattoo or cake icing on a micro scale. So you pipe liquid onto the surface. And so, okay, I can draw this plant. If I can draw it, I can typically pipe it. But can I repeat it? Can I wrap it around a 3D form? Can I stretch it out? Can I make it teeny? There's a lot of variables that go into it. So the stuff now, because I have some of the old school stuff, which is still one of my best sellers, and then some of the newer stuff I've been doing involves a lot more like layers of resisting with liquid latex, and then you add underglaze on top, and then you pipe on, and you pull the latex off, and then you add more underglaze, and it's a whole process. And I just started making another one that's 2 more layers of process.
Okay.
Um,
Give me more.
it's y
More
2
process.
more where I color the clay beforehand, and then I make, a pattern on the clay itself, say the clay's green, on the green clay, and then I add piping on top of that, so it kinda seeps into the pattern and then pull dots into it because dots are fun, and who doesn't love dots? And, yeah, it's really more technical now, but it all starts the same way the first one started. It's just kind of like, here's the colors, here's the vibe, here's what I'm kinda going for, and this is, like, the first thought of this, and it has to kind of come to fruition before I can say, "Okay, this is the color I want, this is repeatable, and this looks super cool," you know?
Heck yeah, most important part. I would love to, like, zoom in and torture you for just a second because I have to divulge that my best friend and I, Dominique, she introduced me to a make space, and we've been just, like, trying our hand at the most basic of hand building in ceramics, and one of the takeaways that I've had is just how intensive, but also multi-layered ceramics is as a process. So I would love to just talk about maybe a project that didn't go the way that you thought, and really just lean into the trauma that is doing ceramics.
So you can say that's just part of everyday making in ceramics, really. It's like you have this idea and in your head or in your sketchbook. It's so cool. Like you're gonna make so much money and you're gonna go viral on Instagram. It's so cool. Okay. And
Yep.
then you make it, and it's like, wait, they look so bad. I can't have this going on. I can't even post this. What am I doing? I will try to sell this as a second or give it to someone I don't like. One particular project, I'll give you 2 quick examples because 'cause they're good. One was for me. I was gonna make miniature teapots with a big knob on the side, kind of like a traditional Japanese style, and I was like, "Man, these are gonna be sick. I love a knob. I can make a killer knob. I'm good at
Heck
teapots."
yeah.
And so I made them, and kind of part of the problem with the way that I work is I throw really, really, really thin, and sometimes it's really great, and sometimes it's to my own detriment. This time it was to my own detriment where the knob of the teapot itself was heavier than the whole teapot and spout and lid. So I had this cute little thing, but you set it down and it just falls over like immediately. So it's completely non-functioning,
No.
right? Out the gate. And I was like, wow, I suck. This is awful. I can't make any more of these.
This is when we bridge over into fine art, right? Like, it symbolizes capitalism and destruction of man.
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
But I had this problem when I first started making big teapots again, was that the body of the teapot was lighter than the spout, and so it would just tip over, and so I posted this beautiful teapot, and it had rocks in it when I posted it because it was, like, just fall right over. But a friend of mine she's a good friend and she's a collector, and she'll buy some of the craziest stuff. She emailed me and she's, "I have to have the teapot," and I said, "Cheryl, it doesn't work." She said, "I don't care. You can sell me the rocks. I'm putting it on a shelf." And I was like, "Well, great. Okay. It'll go to someone who will love it. Sure." The little teapots were not cool enough to repeat. The second one was I wanna make really big things, but it takes a lot of upper body strength and force. So I wanted to make this, like, 4-foot tall vase. Which would be like 20 pounds of clay, which I can't throw 20 pounds of clay. Maybe one day. I've been lifting.
Yeah.
Um, but I was like, "You know what? I could throw this in 2 pieces and put them together." And I don't have much practice with this. There's people who were infinitely better at this than me. And so I said, "I'm gonna do it." I had my assistant with me this summer, and I was like, "This is gonna be awesome. She's gonna see this, like, super cool thing that I'm doing." And so I threw the 2 pieces, and she was there, and then she left, and then, like, later that night, I put them together, And this if I could embody an ogre and a vase, it was there. Like, it was so ugly, and it was, like, lopsided, and it was, like, all mangled, and so the next day
Oh
she came in
no.
and she was like, "Oh my gosh, let me see the vase." And I was like, I don't know, you should see it." So I showed her, and she was like, "Oh, wow." And I said, "I know it's hideous, but I think I'm gonna fire it." And it was like, I mean, it looked like a stone, really, like, it was so mangled. And I sanded it down really nicely and fired it, but there's something about it I really liked because it was like, this is the reality versus expectation, and this is a really
Mm.
good lesson to learn. And so it's, "Okay, I'll fire it, and then if I bisque fire it and then look at it and can see a design on top of it, I'll put that design on it, but if I can't, I'll just put it, like, up in my studio as a good reminder." My ego gets too big. I'm just gonna look up there and see that ogre vase. But I pulled it out of the kiln and I was like, "Man, I could totally see this vase blue." My blue design. And I was like, "I'm gonna paint it blue. I'm gonna put all the line work on it." And it took so long. Like, most pieces that I make blue usually have a total of 4 clumps of berries and leaves on them, and I think this one had 10. Like, it was just huge. And so I fired it and it was beautiful. And it was, like, so weirdly beautiful. And I was like, "I'm gonna keep
Oh,
this for a
amazing.
while." But I took it to a show. I took it to the show in Nashville, and it was the first thing that was purchased, and it was, like, way expensive because it was huge. And so I asked the person who bought it, I said, "Can we keep it up here the duration of the weekend? I'll put a sold sticker on it." And they said, "Sure." But it was, like, way up high, and the sold sticker was very tiny, and I had probably 10 more people come and ask to buy it. And I was like,
No way.
"What is going on with the ogre vase? I guess I should make a couple more of these." I don't So, I've tried since then, and I can't duplicate it. It's
I relate to I joke about the Pinterest fails all the time because Pinterest is so dangerous in the sense of, "Oh, I could do that. I can do that."
Oh,
So,
oh my
nope.
god. Honestly, some people come by and they're like, "Oh, I can make that." And I'm like, "You should try. You should try
Yeah,
it.
what?
You
Oh my
should."
gosh.
People are lovely.
I'm reading The Artist's Way right now, and it's talking about, the critics or the blocked creatives. I love that.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
Artist Way is a good one.
It's one of those books that's so impactful that, like, it's taken me forever to get through it. Because 'cause I'll read, like, one of those chapters and it resonates so much, and it's almost, "Am I ready to face this part of my identity?"
Right. Right. Have you read that
Yep.
book? It's called Art and Fear.
No.
Oh, you should read that one. I think I've read it probably
Eh,
4 times. It's really teeny. It's a teeny book. If you
Perfect.
want, I'll mail you one. I have 2 copies actually, because I thought I lost one and I
Amazing.
went and bought another one.
That'd be huge. That would be
It does.
incredible. I love all things, yeah, creativity and trying to just get through the mess that is the human brain.
It's
Um,
hardcore.
so we've talked about selling and a little bit of marketing, and I want you to answer these next questions just to your comfort level. Making is such a beast in itself that the idea for a lot of people of packaging and keeping an inventory and marketing and even just writing a personal bio, some of that personal branding is so overwhelming that I think it causes a lot of hesitation in terms of trying to take something full time. So, first question for you is making your full-time gig, and how do you approach those other, like, more business-oriented aspects of, you know, just producing and selling?
It's really hard.
Insane.
The way I do it is, well, maybe it's not the best approach, but I sometimes I really put it off because I'm actually at my core scared to do these things, right? Because they make me look at myself and what I value about myself and my work a lot. And I
Mm,
think that's where people will get stuck because we have a lot of displaced value in our society, especially for things we are creating and we're putting a value on to sell. Because you stick it out in the world, 20 people will tell you, "Oh, I could do that. I could buy that at Target. Why is this $50?" And I think that discourages a bunch of people, and the fear of that happening keeps a lot of people from even getting to that point. But I don't know, I when I started making the pots that I wanted to make and learning things that I wanted to learn, I started valuing my time and my work a lot more. So I started pricing my work more. And because like
mm,
basic things like supply and demand, and I'm trying to make a living off this, right? So I have to do a lot of events and lessons or whatever. So, I have to have a lot of work to go to a lot of events to make enough money where I can have my home, have some food, have some electricity. So, that kind of gets into my mind of, okay, well, my time is valuable, my effort is valuable, so I'm going to value myself and my work that way. And if people don't want to buy it, great. And some
Amen.
people get some people get really upset and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna put a sale on my stuff." And I'm like, "Well, if you've got the inventory, great. But if you don't put a sale on your stuff. I'm sorry you had a bad weekend. But next weekend you could sell out your whole booth." Like it really depends on your audience, which is another part of your job. When you're an artist, especially full time, but even not full time, part of your job is putting your work in front of the right people. Doesn't have to be people who buy it, but that's always really good. But people who value it. And I think Instagram's a cool tool because you have this digital portfolio floating out in the world for anyone to see. And, I think that having a website's a really great idea, even if you don't sell anything from it. I had a stock this past holiday season, but that was the first one in about 3 or 4 years because I just never have the inventory for it. And I didn't want to do it. So I just didn't do it. But like in terms of that, like you put what you're making online. Other people see it. Maybe they buy it, maybe they invite you to their gallery, whatever. And I think after valuing yourself, I would say put yourself out there. I applied to a ton of shows. I applied to traveling crafts fairs, gallery shows, competitions, just for fun. And then all those things do require you to write about yourself and your work. Okay. So be honest. If you're making your work, you know more about it than anybody else. So, and I didn't know what to say at first. And I'm like, okay, well, I like plants and I like being outside and I like clay. Okay, that's not very descriptive. What do I like about the plants? You can always get someone to read it and be like, well, what do you mean? What do you like about the plants? What do you like about clay? And then like, how do you do what you
Yeah.
do? And so you kind of figure out what to say. And then, I mean, it changes. Like I wrote this artist statement that I had saved on one of these show websites that's 2 years old. And every time, instead of just typing in a new statement and saving it, I just go and re-edit the old statement. And I'm like, my statement has changed like 10 times, but it all says the same thing just in different ways. So, I
Yeah.
used to be super nervous about, okay, here's my artist statement in my bio. Now I'm like, type it in, move on. Like half
Heck
the
yeah.
time, I don't even know if they read it. I'm sure they do. But, once you start, like you're doing it so much, you're putting yourself out there, you're applying to things and okay, you don't get in them. Who cares? Still apply. You're applying to things. You just kind of get into this groove of, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly what I want to say. Type it out. Boom. 3 sentences, move on.
Yes.
So I think putting yourself out there and valuing yourself enough to put yourself out there and then scheduling in like I'm gonna say dumb business things, but like the imperative business things. I started bookkeeping before I was even full time. I still do all my own bookkeeping, which is probably a mistake, but it helps me schedule too. Like I have my schedule and all my books all together. I can see everything moving together all at once. And I have to schedule in, reply to emails, schedule in, order more boxes, more printing paper, like dumb stuff like that. But I
Yep.
think especially when you're not a full-time artist yet, there's a kind of a misconception of, oh, I just get to make art all the time. And that's really not the case. I mean, I go through pottery takes so long, clay takes so long to process through. I go through big phases of production and then decor. And then in there's office hours in there. Okay, I need to ship these 6 orders today. Okay, I need to reply to emails. Okay, there's 6 deadlines approaching, and I have to have portfolios and statements and blah, 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 blah ready for all of them. I'm going to have to set all those up. There's a cool teapot show I want to apply to that's happening a year from now. Okay, well, I need to make sure that I have teapots ready in 6 months so that 4 months I can apply. And it's just like a whole thing. But
Yeah.
if you don't schedule it in, like it'll never happen. So you got to say, Okay, here's my to-do list for today, which I think is really helpful when you're working for yourself. The organization, our engineering side, if you will. The
Yep.
organization that says, here's what I'm going to do today. Here's what needs to be done. Ship these orders out, reply to emails, mop the studio, put a roast in the crock pot, throw in some laundries, and maybe I can throw some pots tonight if I set up everything. So I think structure is really helpful. And yeah, putting it
That
putting it all out there. If people reject you, who cares? You're still making your stuff.
I love that point so much because I think part of my goal with this content is just showing the reality of kind of sharing in the digital space and building, you know, revenue streams from handmade and artisans. And I think a big piece of that is like the frequency of no's that you need to get to start getting yeses. And I think my day job has shown me this a lot where it's like it actually takes quite a bit of just hoping and submitting and just throwing stuff out there and emailing
Mm.
people and sending, messages to people to be like, "Hey, keep me in mind." There's so
Yep.
much of that before the traction of yes starts to happen. But I think a lot of
Mhm.
people get discouraged first couple weeks, months of trying to do something solo or even just working up to that point.
I mean, it's still I got a no yesterday from something I thought I had in the bag. Like, I didn't was like, "I don't even wanna apply to this. This will be so easy." And it was something, like, way, way, way off that I was, like, kinda meh about, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll just apply, like, it'll be fun. It's kinda close to where I'm living. Sure, whatever." And they told me no yesterday, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of rude, but whatever." But then a month ago, I had a situation that I was really excited about, and I was really hoping for a yes, and I made special pieces for, and I was it's a new design and whatever. And they said yes, and I was, like, over the moon. But I was expecting them to say no and the other people to say yes, but if I hadn't applied for both, I wouldn't have known.
Yep, yep, that's it.
Gotta
No,
put
I'm
put it
so
out
excited
there.
to share that. That's exactly it. So I would love to shift a little bit and talk about your relationship with handmade goods outside of yourself. So I'm sure being at markets, you probably connect with a lot of new people and explore their stuff. But what is your and no pressure, but what is your consumer relationship with handmade goods?
So, my view of handmade goods might be different than the normal person's because I make stuff, right? But it also may be you could say more tainted because I'm at so many markets and I make stuff. So if I see something that I think is kinda junky, I don't wanna buy it, of course, right? But if I see something that's really unique, which I do, I mean, I travel all over and meet all kinds of artists that make these beautiful stuff. So in terms of gifting, I typically gift homemade now or handmade now in the last probably 4 or 5 years. It's typically been all handmade, which I think is more valuable than Amazon or Target stuff. But in terms of, like, my life, I find a more rich experience in some of the handmade things that I can buy or locally grown things that I can buy. So, I mean, I can give you some examples. I've met some great people
I love
here in
that.
Memphis who make the most banging soap, and it's so expensive. But I just think, if I can sell 1 more vase this month, I can buy 6 bars of soap. Sure. And that'll last me for a while. And it is so good. I mean, I have a whole list, like, there's people at a farmer's market close to where my grandmother lives, about 30 minutes, north of here, and they have, like, local honey that they infuse with, like, vanilla bean or hot peppers or lavender, and to me, having some of these things in my home that I get to exist with that people have made or grown or nurtured is like the ultimate luxury. Like, you give me that fantastic soap. You give me your vanilla
Right.
infused honey. I was next to a a pair of women at Porter Schlee 1 year, maybe 2 years ago during the winter, and they were a CBD lotion, bath bomb, deodorant kind of people, um, and they had all these testers that people were trying, and I was like, "Man, that smells so good. That smells like the hippie girl, like, I wanna be. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I should really go smell it." And so I looked at it and I was like, "Babe, can I try this?" And they're like, "Yeah, spray it on." It was this deodorizing spray because I don't wear, like, regular deodorant with all the chemicals, but they're like, "Spray it on, and then if you're gonna shower tonight, that's fine, but if you're not, let us know if you still smell good in the morning." And I was like, okay, I'm not showering tonight. Sure. So I still smelled great in the morning. And I was like, this is awesome. I have to buy this deodorizing spray. So now I get like bottles shipped to my house because of a
Amazing.
connection I made of someone who was like next to me at a show and they wanted to trade. And I was like, oh, heck yeah, like we could trade. So that's Ology Essentials. They're in Nashville. They're women owned and operated by women for women, for anybody, I guess. But they have all sorts of stuff. And I've gifted a lot of that because people are like, is that you that smells like that? What is that? Can I get some of that?
What is it?
And I'm like, well, sure. I have 2 extra bottles. Like, here. I have a friend who does indigo dye. So she makes some of the rockinest clothes. And I was next to her at a show in Nashville, an outdoor show. And for some reason, I think it was like the first weekend of May, I was wearing a long sleeve jumpsuit. Couldn't tell you why. It looked great, but it was like 90 degrees outside. Her business name is Garner Blue. She does a lot of indigo dye. Have you heard of
Oh,
her?
yeah, yeah. I
So
have.
I walked in her booth and I said, Lou, you have to give me your skimpiest linen dress. I'm dying. I'll change right here. I'll Venmo you immediately. And she was just sort of laughing and she said, check the rack. So like I grabbed this fantastic black and blue indigo dyed dress. And I was like, oh my gosh, my life is saved. Cause I was just wearing this cute little skimpy thing. But, I wouldn't have been able to do that if she hadn't been right next to me. If she hadn't been making these great clothes that I could just go say, "Hey, this is what I need." So things like that. Let's see, what else? I don't know. I like a lot of homegrown foods, you know, other potters, people who sew. It's really just
I think
whatever I can get that's handmade or hand grown, I will. And if I can
that's
trade
it.
that way, I will. Like my hairdresser, I trade pots with. She cuts my hair and
No
I
way.
make pots for her. Yeah, and I've known her for 15 years, and she's got, like, a booming absolutely booming business, but I can say, "Hey, I need my haircut," and she's great. "I want a set of mugs," and I'm like, "Great. See you Thursday," you know? It's a
That's
lot of fun.
fantastic. I
So I
I
think
mean, and
yeah.
something you call out, like, the richness of the story behind it is something that I've been trying to get at. It's like, I know this is better. I know this is more valuable to me, but trying to associate, like, why? And it's the
Yeah.
human piece. It's the fact there's a story, like, somebody exchanged their time and, like, time to acquire these skills to make this thing. So, my day job, we're always talking about AI and AI
Mhm.
replacing humans for whatever. And it's interesting, sure, but at the same time, kinda hard for me to make that jump where it just feels different. It feels different when I know somebody's worked on this thing. Can't
Right.
you feel that too? Like, don't you get
They can't because they probably never have eaten off a handmade plate or had coffee out of a handmade mug. Not that this is bad, but, like, a really nice one that they really like. And
Yep,
my partner, Lord bless him, hadn't ever before, we started eating these meals together. And now it's what we reach for in the cabinet. And I didn't know that eating off of a handmade dish was so much more personal or drinking out of a handmade mug was like a personal experience with whoever made it. And I said, well, yeah, that's the fun part. I get
that's
to
right.
have this experience with these people that put essentially their gifts into, this form that we get to use. And I think that's the beauty of life and the beauty of artists is sharing our gifts with people. AI can't do that.
Incredible. Nope, not yet at least.
Not
It's
yet.
like, I hope we're not around when it does.
That's true.
So you called out teaching as well, and I wanna talk about that just a little bit because it's one thing to find this path for yourself to make a living from it. It's another thing to, like, introduce some of these things to I don't wanna say the next generation of makers because cross-generationally people, learn this and it adds value to their lives, but tell me a little bit about teaching and just the effect that it's had on how you approach your work.
So I never intended to teach. I am like the kind of sometimes most crass, strange person I know. And so I always thought, well, I'm not well suited for this. I am not put together enough. But when it came to, people wanting to know what I do, like people when I was working in a community studio, hey, how did you make that bowl? And I'll say, oh, well, here's how I got there. Here's how I started. Here's what I did in the middle. And here's how I finished it. And they're like, oh, okay, you should really teach a class. And I was like, you're right. But then, I got a semi part-time job teaching like 1 day a week to homeschoolers, which was the same format I had been in when I was homeschooled as I took this homeschooled art class. So I got this really interesting point in my life where I got to be the teacher of the homeschooled art class that I grew up in. And I got to start teaching people how I was taught and the things that I wish I had learned in high school. So I had them start creating three-dimensional objects, and I had them using clay when they were in like fifth grade. And their moms were very, very taken aback, but whatever. Um, and so, that was kind of a launch into teaching that was a light lift because they were, kids instead of adults. That really kind of broke the ice for me in terms of, okay, there's different learners, there's different teaching methods, there's different way to test people, there's different ways to approach this depending on the student. And then I had a few people reach out to me for, hey, can you teach us how to throw on the wheel, which is very glamorous. Everyone wants to know how to make pottery on the wheel, but it's so hard. No one tells you that
Yes.
no one knows how to do it, and it's going to take you months to learn and blah, blah, blah. So I said, "Well, yeah, I throw 20 pieces every couple days. Sure. I could do this with my eyes closed. Yeah, I'll teach someone how to throw, sure." So I started doing classes at the studio I was working at when I was doing their production before COVID, and I was teaching some group classes there. And then I started doing private lessons when I was at the private studio that I was at, which I liked better because it was just me and one person or me and two people right there, and they had no idea what they were or weren't learning. So it's just kind of open for me to do whatever I wanted. Okay, well, we're going to make plates today. Okay, well, let's make plates. So that's been kind of an interesting journey of what all different students I have. And I've had everybody from 6 years old to 75, you know, and I've
Wow.
had people who've had experience and people who haven't. And then I structure my lessons in a way where they can be for throwing or for hand building or for surface or for a mixture of all of it. So I've had every combination. Oh, we're going to do a 4-week pack. You're going to learn throwing, hand building, surface, and then we're going to glaze and fire all your pieces. Or you just want to learn throwing. I have one student who I think she's coming on Saturday, even. I mean, we've been doing lessons on and off for 2 years. And she wants to learn how to throw different forms, doesn't have the equipment, really loves me. We really vibe out. So she'll come over. She'll say, I want to throw this today. And I'm like, okay, I'll demo for you and I'll just sit here and watch you while you do this and then stop you if you're like messing up your piece.
Yep.
And then I have, like a mother and son combo who this is what they do together and they come once a year. And so I get really different dynamics. And I used to do date night classes a little bit, but as show frequency ramps up, the lessons typically go down because they do take a lot of prep time. I have to clean my studio for someone to come over. And
Yep.
so it takes some
Yeah.
time. And usually if I'm in full on production or show mode, I'm not like super inclined to clean my studio. But, if I have the capacity, I should say, not availability, but capacity, I love doing lessons. And I have people reach out every once in a while and say, hey, can we do it? Or hey, can I gift this to my mom? An experience, but it's a lot of fun teaching people who don't know, who've never tried it before, and then seeing how they get to experience clay and remembering how I experienced clay for the first time. And I
Yeah.
hope it's just as fun.
Well, last thing for you, I would love to share with anybody that listens where we can find your work or just how to interact with you online, maybe the next event you have coming up. Just where can we find you?
Well, the next event, I'm doing a show in Fairhope, Alabama. I don't know how many of your listeners live there, but if you have any clay people, I will be at the National Clay Conference in Sika in the end of March in Salt Lake City. But I'm on Instagram at Olivia Avery Art. No punctuation, no BS, no nothing. Just Olivia Avery Art. Not on
Claimed it.
Facebook, except for my, mom's friend. Not on Twitter or X or whatever. I've heard a few things about Blue Sky because Meta's out. I don't know. I'm trying to keep up. But Instagram, my website, that's better. My website is oliviaaveryart.com. That's a good place. But yeah, you can shoot me an email. You can contact me off of Instagram or my website, or I think if you Google like Olivia Avery pottery or ceramics, one of those two will come up. So you just have
One of
to
those
either
is you.
one of those is me.
Oh, that's absolutely amazing. Well, Olivia, I'm just over the moon excited about everything that you've shared. Like, this just blows me away. All right, now it's your turn. Go find that maker that sets your heart on fire and tickles your fancy. Again, the theme for this month is something that makes enjoying your favorite meal even more enjoyable. This stuff is more fun with company, so tell a friend, make a date out of it, make a maker's day, and stay cool, my handmade friends. Until next month.